Good morning. My name is Richard Charnock and welcome to the 21st webinar in this series. And over the past 20 weeks, our webinars have focused on the practical steps businesses needed to take to adjust to the way you and your people are working and how to prepare for the future. We've covered a wide range of topics from sustaining business performance, navigating redundancies, cash flow leadership, key imperatives for growth, and last week's panel looked at how else recruiters can solve clients' problems. What services could this include, and building these from scratch. As a reminder, all of those webinars are available on the REC website. Our panel today will be looking at how to provide giving you insights that will help leaders feel when they've got concern about their business being in deadlock. I'm joined today by two of our regular panelists and our becoming regular guest panelist. So Dave Pye from 2Augment. 2Augment are business consultants and strategic advisors to the recruitment industry. Dave works in a non-exec advisory capacity with his clients, both in the UK and abroad. And he's well known as an MD and CEO within the industry and is presently a non-exec director of both recruitment and technology businesses. We're also joined by Howard Greenwood from Love Work Life, a consultancy which provides ethical support to help drive both business and personal growth. Howard has spent over 25 years in the industry and has a proven track record of managing businesses, increasing both their revenues and profitabilities. We're also joined by Paul Sharp, who has over 18 years of experience in the recruitment sector. Paul has pretty much covered all bases, working for large national agencies. He's worked for an SME technical agency. He's built and led RPOs, MSP teams, and in between worked in-house within a business process outsourcing environment. But as always, we've got a packed agenda for today's webinar. And if you've got any questions, please use the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will endeavour to answer as many as possible. But for now, let's kick off with our first question. So on this question, I'm going to turn to Howard first to join me. And the question is, in previous webinars, we've mentioned developing an attack strategy and how this can help move a business forward. What is and what does an attack strategy look like, Howard?
Well, thanks for that, Richard. I do like the word attack strategy, because I think that's what we should be doing as we sort of move out of lockdown. So first of all, good morning, everybody. As you realise, Paul's not here today. Paul Jacobs not here today, but if he was, I'm sure he'd be telling us how sunny Woodford Green is. Well, for us northern listeners, Yorkshire, thankfully today is just a touch cooler than it was yesterday. So, okay, attack strategy. I'm sure everyone will have a sort of different view of this. So to me, an attack strategy is really about that first 4 weeks of getting on the front foot, establishing the strengths in your businesses and where you're fragile. So the question that you need sort of asking your team and your team need to answer is how fragile are your client relationships? And it'd be interesting from lockdown what that has brought about and your mindset about how fragile your client relationships are. So depending on your business, your attack strategy will differ, but not by too much, I don't think, and certainly in those first 4 weeks. To me, the main thing is the financial viewpoint of your business, and it's about achieving break even. So are you achieving break even or not? So if you're purely a perm business, each month obviously you start at zero. So it's imperative that you know your break even point and understand what might change as furlough payments decrease over time up to October. So does your then break even point increase? You need to understand how many placements you need to make per month to achieve that break even. Now, what I always do is break even plus 20%. Let's stretch the teams a little bit to start making profit as soon as we can. We then start to think about our temp or contract lines. You need to know, does your weekly run rate put the business bottom line profit above or below the break-even point? If it's below, then what's the difference? And what do you need to make up that difference so you start to make break-even plus 20%? So you need to start to think about milestones that you put in, okay? So if you're already above that break-even point plus 20% per month, You need to start to think about what you've been doing and think about, okay, how do I grow my business? So you start to think about consecutive months of growth, year-on-year growth. So I'd start to think about what I'm doing now. Look at my last month. Can I grow my last month by 20%? And if I can do that over the next 3 consecutive months, how quickly can I get back to my year-on-year performance? So my immediate attack strategy for the first 4 weeks is very, very straightforward. To me, what I'd be looking at is my buying clients that I've had over the last 3 to 5 years. I'd pull all my data, look at how much they spent and when they spent it with you. I'd then be sitting down with my team and breaking the list into 3 lists. Buying clients, those that have bought from you in 2020. Lapsed clients, those that have not bought since 2020, but you're still in touch with. And what I'd call dead clients, those that have basically fallen off your radar and you don't know whether they're alive or not and what's going on. So you need a plan. And to me, then the plan is very, very simple. Buying clients. How do you get more out of those clients? We need to visit them, Zoom meetings, find out what their lockdown attack strategy is, because they will have a lockdown attack strategy as well. So what problems are they facing and how can you help them with their problems? What new services can you offer them and how can you make your recruitment processes more cost saving to them? Because one of the big things they want to try and do is drive down the cost of recruitment. So how can we do that? Remember, that's not the cost of your fee, it's the total cost of recruitment. So what can we give clients that makes us more sticky within those clients, that makes them want to use us more and more? How do we add value? Lapsed clients, we need to know what we have to do in order to get them to buy from us again. So like the buying clients, what are their problems that we can cure? What can we give them that we weren't giving them in the past that made them lapse? And they're dead clients, we need to find whether they are genuinely dead or just forgotten. And if they are forgotten, again, like lapse and buying clients, what can we do that brings them back online and actually billing with them? So you need to work out who's buying now, who's going to buy in the future, and again, who in your business are dealing with them and what you're doing with them. So you need to start to think then how you influence your clients. So you have a sponsor in the client, the person you normally go to. So is that sponsor the person that is the C-suite? Is that sponsor the owner of the business? Or is that sponsor just a line that recruits? Are you in touch with the owner? How can you help finance, legal, HR with their business to reduce their costs of recruitment? Do you know who your threats are? And there's lots of things that we could talk about. And I think, Richard, what I'd probably say is let's let Dave and Paul have a conversation on this as well, because I could go on for the whole hour about this. And I think it's about what we've talked about that first week is scratching the surface of what we need to do. But to me, once you understand that you can get more out of the clients that you're already dealing with and have dealt with in the past, then you can start to then think about the new clients that you can introduce and bring that to you. So to me, that attack strategy is about getting yourself on that front foot in the first 4 weeks. We think about consultants coming back from furlough that might have that little bit of malaise, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later on. To me, then already they have a focus instantly of what they need to do, what they need to achieve, and you need to set milestones around that. So I'll pass that back to you, Richard, so you can let Dave and Paul have a conversation on that, because I think they might have a different views on that as well.
That's great. Thanks, Howard. And it's a message of let's plan it and be proactive about it and keep moving forward with it. So yeah, great advice.
Absolutely.
Dave, thanks for joining us and good morning.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, good morning, Rich. And yeah, some great points there from Howard. I'm a big fan of Lewis Hamilton, and I was watching him on Sunday. Obviously, didn't win that one, but he did say an interesting thing after the first Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix that he won. And he just said, "Look, if you see a gap and you don't go for it, you're not a racing driver." And everybody knows that he is one of the most aggressive as well as one of the best racing drivers. And it's that sense of there are going to be gaps appearing in our clients' relationships with their clients, in our competitors' relationships. There are going to be things that are going to be happening in the next 6 months. And if you see or you sense that gap, go for it. become a Lewis Hamilton, become a racing driver and go for it. And that's the attack bit. And many, many moons ago, I think when week 21, I think it was about week 3 or 4, I remember saying something that that I've done with my clients that I found really helpful in terms of putting a strategy together. And I thought it's probably worth sharing again. And that's the judo flip strategy. And that's the bit where you write down, you make a list of the obvious approach that you can make with that particular client or with that particular candidate in any given scenario. So you write it down, and then on the right hand side of the page you do a judo flip and you literally write down the opposite of what you think you should do. So whatever it is that you've got, whatever your history is, whatever your culture is, whatever it is that the way that you develop your relationship with your clients and your candidates, you write down the complete opposite of what you think you should do. And out of that, and if there's a list of 20 things, out of that, what will come are 1 or 2 really good ideas that you perhaps haven't thought about. And it's a really good tool, a really good thing to use with your leadership team or with your management team to say, come on, team, what do you think we should do here? Like, what's the complete opposite of it? And it is a strategic way of thinking about how are you going to attack that one scenario or that given situation, because there's kind of 6 things to look at for me that you should be looking at it, but part of it is the right source. So, you know, from a work point of view, yeah, are you getting the maximum out of the people you've got, and looking at that and working out, am I getting the best of those people? That's part of the strategy. Am I working in the right way? And by that I mean we've got this balance of home and working in the office for some people. So where are you getting the maximum output? And building on that and looking at that by individual, by team, or by office. And then from a strategic point of view, have I got the right people doing the right things? Yeah, so is my business the right size for the gap that I'm trying to fill, for where that market is? That's something that's you know, vital now, because to close that gap, you've got a short period of time. Lewis Hamilton may have 0.2 of a second. You may have a week before somebody else does something. If it's a candidate, you may have 45 minutes before somebody else gets to that candidate. And then the right shape. You know, is your workforce, the people you've got, whether you've got 4 people or 40 people or 400 people, have you got them doing the right things to attack the market as it is now? And make sure that, we've had this before, but make sure that they've got the right skills. Your job as a leader is to upskill your people, to give them the right skills, and that judo flip, it helps find out as a leader who of your managers, who of your leaders have got that. And then the last bit, of course, is where you are devoting your monetary spend, where you've got money to spend to go after the market, or you've got limited money because of what we've been through. Are you putting it in the right place? I think if you pull all those things together, going back to the Lewis Hamilton quote before Paul comes on, it is that bit. There's a gap. Let's go for it. Let's do something. Let's attack it. And that's the strategic way I would deal with it.
Thanks, Dave. And I'm sorry if anybody else had a little bit of echo or distortion while Dave was talking. It was clear, Dave, but there was some background. So if it happens again, I will come back to you and maybe ask you to cover a point if it happens later in the webinar. Okay, but thank you very much for that. And good morning, Paul.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me back. I know what everybody's thinking. It's nice and sunny in Yorkshire, as Howard has just said, but I can confirm, as normal, it's a little bit sunnier in Lancashire. The sun always shines a little bit brighter in Lancashire than Yorkshire.
No.
Moving on. I think Howard and Dave have covered some really great points. I think for me, I think when you are running a business, I think it's very hard sometimes to actually step out of the business. And I think, you know, COVID is presented us with this opportunity to actually come out and take stock. So I think the first thing for me is the question I would ask is, what is your business strategy? Have you revisited your business strategy, given that the world has now significantly changed in a very short period of time? If you haven't, then as Dave just said, you've got a small finite window to actually do that, to make sure you adjust to the the market conditions and everything else. So I think that's the first and foremost bit for me. And within that strategy, and Howard's talked a little bit about this, it's about your products, it's about your services, it's about how you're different to your competition, it's about your markets, your channels. All those things need to come under review, because some of the things that you've sold in the past may not be sellable in the future, or you may not get the same amount of volume or recurring revenue out of those services going forward. And I talked last week very much about how after almost every recession, the first thing to come back is non-perm labour. So that's your temp and contract bit. If you're an agency that's been very reliant upon perm revenue, you need to now start taking stock of what are you going to do to adjust your product offering, your services going forward, to make sure that you're not fighting against some of the market forces. Dave just talked about, have you got the right people in the right place and everything else. That then comes down to that part, which is, if that's what you're going to do going forward, then absolutely have you got the right people in the right seats with the right skills. Otherwise, you won't be able to execute your people strategy. So business strategy first, people strategy in tandem. And I'll just touch briefly upon one of the point which Howard talked about, which is about lapsed clients and everything else. I think there's another stage as well, which is actually looking at which clients you actually make money from. So once you've worked out what your client needs are going forward, I think you've also got to look at, what is the actual profitability of working with some of those clients going forward. If you're on a PSL, you're probably going to be restricted to some degree by what fees you can charge versus the ad hoc sort of spot business. So, what effect does that have on your business going forward? And how do you sort of combat, particularly on sort of PSL and structured clients, that some of the rates are starting to come down, and therefore this plays back to what Howard said, which is, what are the services or solutions can you sell that may give you something different, or a little bit more of a deeper embedded relationship with your client going forward. So look at your clients in terms of opportunity, but also look at your clients in terms of how much money do you actually make. And I'll just give you one small story very, very quickly. I did a similar piece of work with a team about 3 years ago. There was a big investment bank company in Canary Wharf. And when we dug under the covers, they were actually generating 42 CVs to make one placement. And when you looked at the cost of the labour and the time and the salaries and the commission and everything else, they were losing loads and loads of money. So it was better to strip some of the assets back, put that into the sort of cash cow category, keep it going for as long as you possibly can and make money out of it as easily as what you can, but divert some of that labour and resource into other channels and markets which you could make a lot more money from.
Thanks very much, Paul. And just on the back of that story, when I was first recruiting, I came across a client. Well, I had a number of clients that started to just take so long to deliberate over decisions, and it was because they had suppliers like the one you were talking about that were sending over 40 odd CVs and all that kind of stuff. So I changed my tack, and this is something the audience may wish to consider. And I, as Howard said, and as you've said, I added a bit of value that made me much more efficient. So instead of selling a CV in, I sold a recruitment day. So the client, their value getting out of it was they just put one day aside to recruit. And I would then make sure we had the right CVs, the right candidates, and I would turn up to their office and act as that line manager's or hiring manager's PA for the day. I would meet and greet the candidates. I would bring them to the room. I'd brief the client beforehand, before each candidate. I'd take notes. Of course, what was I doing? After each candidate, I was getting the feedback direct from the client, and at the end of the day, it gave me the opportunity to close the deal. And for every single one of those days I sold, which cost nothing to the client other than the hire, I got a hire off every single day. So that was 100%. It stripped out all of that hard work I had to do beforehand, because I was doing all the sifting. So it was a really good way of giving extra value to the client, but also going on the attack without literally attacking my opposition, because it was implied it was our recruitment day. Therefore, I automatically got sole agency out of it.
Brilliant.
So there we go. Just a small one and not a big change to the way people might need to operate. But anyway, thank you. Thanks for hanging on. So I wasn't talking to myself there. So let's turn to our next question. And I think for this one, let's put Dave on the spot for this question in the first instance, please. So welcome back, Dave. In previous webinars, we've spoken a lot about building a positive mindset, particularly for business leaders. What approach should leaders be taking to create better mindsets within their teams as well, and do it in a way that helps staff adjust, particularly for those that are coming back off furlough?
Yeah, isn't it? It's a great question, because there are hopefully a lot of your staff coming back off furlough. There are areas of the market that are now proving to be very resilient and more buoyant than perhaps we thought it would be. And some of you may be thinking, do I want X, Y, Z to come back from furlough? And if you can afford to do it and there's work for them to do, then I would encourage you very much to do that. Because in the last recession, we lost about 40% of really good recruitment consultants, and they never really came back. And for the past few years before this pandemic, most recruitment companies have been struggling to hire really good talent because talent left the industry. I guess this is a personal plea from me to you as a leader in a recruitment company. If you can hold on to some of the talent you've got, please do. I said many years ago, many months ago, when we started doing these, that I'm on the board of a hospital that's based in the Middle East, and the medical director had stood up with all of the 22 leaders of the hospital, and he reminded them that leaders absorb fear and exude hope. And it was such a great line that I jotted it down, and I don't make any apology for saying it again, because that's our job now for these people coming back off furlough, because so many of them will have been a little bit numbed by the fact that they haven't been working, and they're going to be focusing on what they can't do rather than what they can do. And your job as a leader is to help them focus on what they can do, to remind them that they're good, to remind them that they're working for a good company, that you are a good leader, and that you're going to take them through what they need to do to get back up to speed, and to encourage them to get back up to speed as quickly as possible. Some will come back a little bit like a headless chicken. They have been so looking forward to getting back to work that they're going to need someone to say, well, hang on, calm down. This is what we need you to do. And that goes back to the purpose of the organization. Can I remind you that while you've been off, this is still what we're about. This is what the company's vision is. This is what our purpose is. This is what our mission is. And this is your part in it. And this is what I'd like you to do. So it's about encouraging them to get back to do the right things, and to keep praising them each step of the way. Because some of them won't have a stronger mindset as you will as a leader. If you're expecting perfection, can I ask you to replace the word perfection with progress, and just encourage them to make progress each step of the way? Recruiters, I've always said, recruiters never had a bad day. If you speak to a good recruiter, they'll always say, I'm having a great day. Well, some of your furlough people may not be. There's going to be that nervousness, there's going to be that trepidation, and your job as a leader is to exude hope. Is to take that fear away and to remind them of this is where we are, this is what your position is, and we'll look after you and get going. I would encourage them to get on the phone and be speaking to as many clients, depending on what their role is, but to be speaking to as many clients and or candidates as they possibly can, because that will get them back in the game as quickly as possible. You know that bit where you fall off your bike and your parents said, get back on your bike as quickly as possible, and you used to think, no, that's just nuts, I've just fallen off, I don't want to do that. And they would say to you, well, it's the right thing to do. And of course, with hindsight, for the most part, it is the right thing to do. I went through the handlebars of my chopper, and that ages me, as a young kid, and my parents said, get back on it again. And I went through the handlebars again. But the point was, I then got back on it again. And for our people coming back from furlough, that's the right approach. Get them doing stuff, get them moving, and encourage progress rather than perfectionism. And hopefully that will help you to get your business also moving as forward as fast as it can do with all those people coming back.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you very much. Just a top tip, on a chopper, back brake first.
Yes, there were all sorts of top tips, but I was forever falling off the blooming thing.
Oh, bless you. Thank you very much for those points. Howard, great to see you back. Same question to you, sir.
Yes, and Dave, I admit on the chopper, I had a friend who was same age on a chopper, and he came off his, but unfortunately impaled himself on the handlebars, which wasn't very nice. So lost half a kidney. So always back brake first. I learned that very quickly from there. So not a great one. But mindset is a very interesting one. As you know, Dave was saying there, it's about getting back on your bike when you fall off. And I think, you know, I always think about mindset very simply. I run lots of sessions for my clients on mindset, and each time what I'm amazed is how powerful the mind actually is. It's the most powerful tool that you've got in recruitment, but sometimes it's the most least used tool in recruitment. So I think we've got to think about the small change that we can make to mindsets that actually has a huge change and benefits to the business. And the first change, obviously, is you as a leader, is how you exude your mindset and how you push your mindset to other people. So if you're positive or negative, okay, that comes across. So the first thing I always think about is the self-talk, because everyone has that self-talk that we speak to ourselves constantly inside. And what we've got to think about is what we are saying to ourselves, because sometimes subliminally what we don't realize is what we're saying to ourselves, we're also pushing that out onto other people. So we've got to think about this, and we've got to think about how we talk to ourselves. And guess what? We're in control of what we say to ourselves. And I always think inside ourselves, we have two different types of people. We have the imperfect you inside yourself, and then you have the perfect you inside yourself. And these two people are always at loggerheads. One's trying to dominate the other one, you know, and how it works. And I think I gave an example sort of in one of the webinars earlier, but I'll give you the same sort of style of analogy. During lockdown, my fridge was getting an awful lot of use. In fact, so much use, I almost blew the fridge bulb, which is almost unheard of. So I was using it too much, and I said, right, okay, I seriously need to get back into fitness, back into training, and start to eat better. So the perfect me said, right, I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning rather than 7. I'm going to do a 40-minute HIIT session, have a nice healthy breakfast, and start my day at 7:10. My alarm went off at 6 o'clock. Because my perfect me had set my alarm for 6 o'clock. I was feeling good. The imperfect me said, hold on, idiot, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Have a lie-in. And so I rolled over and hit the snooze button. And how many people do that? It's that conflict of the perfect you and the imperfect you. Following day, though, I was up at 6 o'clock. I chose my perfect day. I chose to dominate the words inside me. So you got to think, we're not born pessimistic. We're not born optimistic. We're a creation of our environment. So if you're a pessimist manager in your environment, then your team will be pessimistic. So you have to be able to work that, and you can change one from another. There's a very famous experiment in the States that went on, and I'll give you a very quick abridged version of it. Okay, so they were working in Harvard School, and they wanted to work on who was optimistic and who was pessimistic. And what you've got to think about, when people go to Harvard, they're used to being the 1% cleverest person or richest person within their school where they've gone. When they get to Harvard, only 1% of those people are in the same situation, and 50% are now below average. So lots of people struggle with pessimism and optimism when they get to Harvard. So he worked out that actually the more pessimistic you are, the more open or less open you are to actually opportunity out there. And so he did a test. So he took 200 people, tested them for their optimism and their pessimism, and split them, the optimistic scale and the pessimistic people. And he gave them a challenge. He put them all outside an individual shop, gave them all a $10 note, and said, your job is to walk inside that shop, spend $10. You have to come out with an object worth $10 and a receipt and nothing else. But you must also come out with a $10 bill, but without committing a criminal offence. What was interesting was, as people are now probably thinking about, how would you do that? So if you're thinking this is impossible, you're pessimistic. The optimistic side of us will be thinking, right, where's the trick? What's going on? How do I do that? What can I do to that? And I saw Richard's eyes thinking, rolling his head, instantly thinking, there's a way I can do this and the way I can do this. What he worked out was, because people close themselves off to opportunities, what he did was he put a $10 note at the corner of the door when they open the door. 90% of the optimistic people saw it, picked it up, bought a $10 product, came out with their product, came out with their receipt and the $10 bill. 90% of the pessimistic people completely missed it because they didn't believe it was achievable. So as a manager, you need to be optimistic. You need to be positive and create that positive influence around your team. You need to look for wins. You need to, as Dave was saying, you need to praise your people. You need to create that culture and that mindset that demonstrates to people that we're all in the boat. All of us need to make the boat go faster. So anything that we can do that creates that optimistic environment where people see the opportunity, and as Lewis Hamilton, and take that opportunity and seize that gap, then that is all about mindset. And you are in charge of your mindset, and your mindset is a really powerful tool. And I say, going through these sessions, it's interesting when we talk about things like that, how people suddenly change their mindsets, and little bits of change, because you're never born, as I said, as an optimist, and you're never born as a pessimist. You're a creation of your environment. So as leaders, you need to be really optimistic, but also you've got to think you are under pressure as well. So you need to surround yourself with positive people. So if your team aren't positive, you need to get people in that are positive. You need to speak to people outside the business for yourself so you can get positivity from there as well, and then be that most optimistic person in the business, driving that positivity all the way through. To me, Richard, I'd be looking at, and that's the way I would sort of look for my point, that I looked at lockdown. And it'd be interesting if you have this conversation with me and Paul Jacobs. The day that lockdown happened, 7:30 when Boris announced it, 7:31 Paul's on the phone, and we had this conversation, and we laid out a very optimistic plan, and that plan will come to fruition later on this month and next month, okay, of what we're going to do. So we seized the opportunity and we took that. We didn't take a pessimistic approach, we took an optimistic approach, and it's proved benefit to us.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks, Howard. I mean, somebody, I think in one of the previous webinars, described it as we're all in the storm, but we're in different boats. And some of us are going to run for harbour, and some of us are going to sail out and take advantage. And I think it's just a different analogy of the same piece, and that's the key. So thank you for that, Howard. And thanks for joining us again, Paul. Let's put the same question to you, sir.
So I'll answer this in a slightly different way, just in order not to repeat the really great points that Dave and Howard have made. So Dave talked very much around sort of the business and the vision, the mission, and standing up as leaders. Howard's talked very much about positive mindset. I think an element for me is around the people. And Howard was just starting to touch upon that then. But I think as leaders, we've got to build trust with our people. And trust for me is built on many different things, but for me it's built around empathy, logic, and authenticity. I think the empathy bit is where we really need to listen to people and find out about people. And if you think about that just for a second, people have been on furlough, they've just started to come back to the office. They may still have sort of childcare issues. They may have a different set of values and priorities in life now because of COVID. And there's been lots of stories published, particularly by people like CIPD, around how COVID has reset values and desires and needs and wants in people, and things have changed. And so, therefore, I think as a leader, we almost have to get to know our people again in terms of what are their needs, wants, desires, must-haves, nice-to-haves, and everything else going forward, because it may have changed. And I spoke to an individual this week who was used to travelling in from, was about an hour away from Manchester into Manchester 5 days a week. And he just said, he wasn't too sure what the future held with his employer going forward, because he hadn't raised it, his boss hadn't asked, but he did not want to go back to doing 5 days a week in Manchester. And for one primary reason, he had a young family and he'd got used to being at home more with the young family. So, playing that through, if you were his, leader, if you'd have sat down with that individual and said, what's important to you, what do you want out of your career now, has any sort of values or, needs and requirements sort of changed, then if that had come out in conversation, then you'd attack that straight head on, and gave them that reassurance that actually that was fine, that was that was all good now in the new world. Then you're getting rid of that uncertainty which is playing out in people's minds at this moment in time, given how tough the job market is. So I think going back to the trust triangle, really pushing the empathy part and really listening to people in terms of how it's affected people, if it has affected people, by the way, and then starting to think about, does that mean that from a people perspective your values have changed? Does it mean your culture is going to be different going forward? If it is, how do you unite that under one umbrella for everybody else? And a really good way of doing this is actually, I call these orbits, and people may be familiar with orbits. You can use orbits with business planning and strategy, but you can also use it with people's personal orbits. So in there you're getting to know what are people's 3-year plan, both from a personal perspective, but also from a work, and how can the two align, and how can one facilitate the other and the other way around. And I think it's that deep understanding of what makes people tick and how they tick that can help you sort of mitigate any risk around losing people going forward. And if anybody needs any help on the orbits, just need to drop me a line, either email or LinkedIn. And just very quickly, not to be outdone on the analogies, because I do feel a bit outdone on the analogies this morning, but the last one for me is just the positivity. And I think sometimes we do spot the things that people do wrong and don't always spot the things that people do right. And in Alex Ferguson's autobiography, not that I'm a Alex Ferguson fan, by the way, but I do think he was a great manager. One of the things he talks about was this 5-to-1 rule, and find 5 positive things about your team or the individuals to every one area that you want them to work on. And he shared this very good analogy from a very early age. They told David Beckham every day that he was the best in the world at taking free kicks, and that had a phenomenal effect on David Beckham. And a few years later, he became one of the best takers of a free kick in the world. He told the same story about people like Eric Cantona. So it's this positivity and this 5-to-1 rule about finding 5 really positive things to help people get into that positive mindset that Howard talked about as leaders. So probably a little bit lower down and more around the team and the people.
Thanks very much, Paul. And fascinating stuff. An analogy about Alex Ferguson, I never thought I'd hear from you. But no, that's great. Thank you very much.
I hope this isn't being recorded, by the
way. I'd just like to remind the audience that this is part of this webinar is all for you. So if you've got questions coming in, we've got 1 or 2, but got questions coming in. What keeps you awake at night? Let's ask these experts that are on here now. They've got vast amounts of experience, and let's ask them any questions you want, and we'll take them from there. One of the questions that I'd want to come back to a little bit on is furlough. So I'm going to turn to Howard in the first instance. So this is around staff returning from furlough, Howard. The question we've been asked is, should you have a formal onboarding program for when they return? And if so, what should those components be?
So I think, to steal one of Dave's line on most webinars, the simple answer is yes. Thank you. Now, the long answer is also yes. No. So I think we've been off now 148 days. That's 5 months. So you need to set up an onboarding program to get people back up to speed, to help motivate them and help to shake off that malaise, because there will be a malaise with these people. And what you've got to start to think is that you, as a business owner, if you're like me, you've probably worked every one of those 148 days. Your people have been off doing whatever they like for those 148 days. So coming back to them is going to be a bit of a culture shock, where you're still in that mindset of work, work, work. So we have to start to work on how we change that mindset back. So I think having an initial welcome back strategy meeting with all your staff, those that have been furloughed and those that have been working all the way through, is absolutely paramount. I think if you can then outline your strategy and what your strategy is, then they start to see where they're going. They can start to see how they fit back into that business. Part of that would be outlining upskilling, refreshing, and an ongoing training strategy that you need to build and execute to make sure everybody's skills get back to where they were quickly, because they will have degraded considerably over that amount of time, but then improve. So best practice needs to be looked at, and we need to look at what we need to be improving and then put training modules around that. So there are no excuses. Everyone needs to improve and build their skill set. If you think about 98% of clients that they want to reduce their recruitment costs because they see little value in the recruitment business, we've got to think we've got to now create value. So if you start to look at our data and look at the holes that you had in your recruitment process pre-lockdown, and those holes are generally there because what we never did before was really evaluate our process. We always blame somebody for something else. Why is our attrition so poor? Because the people we recruit aren't good enough to be recruiters. Well, somewhere in there, the process can't be right. We can't keep recruiting the same wrong people unless the process is wrong. So we need to look at our processes and look at what we need to change. So you could look at, say, your placement to job to placement ratio. That might be poor. How do you change that? Look at your CV interview ratio. That might be great, but your interview to offer ratio might be poor. So whatever the stats say when your stats come out, don't ignore them. They do not lie. So then you can build a training plan around that, built on strengths and developing and changing weaknesses into strengths. And that might be putting people into the right job as well as changing the process, because you might have the people in the wrong job. So you need to start to think about upskilling your team on the new ways that you do things, and think of what we're going to talk about next. I think we're talking about the way we can do things differently, okay? But what we've got to think about is, if we're going to put new skills into the business, you can't put new skills on top of poorly laid basics. So if your basics aren't right in the first place, then putting new skills on isn't going to work. So you need to ensure your core basics are embedded. And to me, there's no excuse about this. Training should be now about getting the core basics back into the people and then building back on those core basics. So to me, a training plan needs to be daily, weekly, monthly. Your people are your most expensive and your best asset. So feed them to help them grow. When you want to sell a house, what you don't do is let your garden grow, and so it becomes a jungle. And yet what we don't do is manicure our people and keep them looking pristine, feed them and feed them to make the flowers grow and make it grow into a wonderful looking garden. What we do, that's what we should be doing now as a leader. So your role as a leader is to be the catalyst to add value to their lives, to unlock their potential. So you need to be aware of your own capabilities and find your own, I keep using this phrase, intellectual humility, and then surround yourself with positive people and let those people get on with their job. It's about creating passion. It's about creating idea bubbles. It's about creating an opportunity that people can think they can develop themselves, and you're developing them as well. So anything that you can do to help them do their job better needs to be as part of that training plan. But as I say, the training plan should be daily, weekly, monthly. So think it's training, it's coaching, it's mentoring from internal sources and external sources. I'd get my best people coaching and mentoring the new people into the business. I'd get people who are good at certain things delivering training courses on that on a daily basis. I'd get external people coming in giving a different voice to various different things. We can't afford to go back to the old ways, which are traditionally, here's 2 days of training, now you're perfect to recruitment, go bill me millions of pounds. And generally what happens after 6 months is, you're rubbish at recruitment, I'm going to get rid of you because you're no good at what you've done. But what you've actually done is give them 2 days of training and then put them in the most pressurized environment and expect them to thrive and survive, rather than training and coaching and mentoring and develop them day by day by day. So to me, the components should be quite simple. Have an attack strategy. It has a purpose. It has a common goal for all. Set milestones in that attack strategy, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and celebrate them. Have a training plan that involves everyone, daily, weekly, monthly. This needs to be mandated, not a nice to have. Unlock the potential, help your people succeed. To do that, you need to know your financial status and know your data, so you know where you can improve and what you can improve, how you can grow your top line that affects your bottom line. So you've got to start to think about these type of things as an onboarding strategy when we come back into work. And that involves the people that have been in work constantly with you and those that have been on furlough. Set a date, bring them in. Even if you're going to bring people back part-time from furlough over a certain period of time, set your a date of attack. That's when we're going to do it. That's D-Day. This is when we're off. Okay, bring them all in, have that meeting about what's going on, and then everyone knows what's going on. Implement it, run it, live it, breathe it, make it positive. And that's what I'd be doing, Richard.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Howard. And it's I think it's interesting as well just to remember that there will be people going on furlough that when you said meeting, still think getting in a room together face to face. And
yes,
those people that have been working throughout think meeting, and it's automatically our reset is, do we use Zoom, do we use Teams, do we use other brands available? And so the mindset of those individuals, their basic reset and basic position starting point can be, they're not always, but it can be very different. So I think it's just remembering that they've not come on that journey, and they need to go on that journey. So that's vital.
It's quite interesting. I speak to my clients quite a lot, and I ask them, well, how do you want this meeting to take place? Do you want the newfangled Zoom, Teams, etc., or potentially do you want the old-fashioned phone? And I get a giggle now, oh, old-fashioned phone, because it is now old-fashioned. Or do you want me to come and meet you? And it's surprising. Most people are choosing Zoom. Some people are choosing come and meet me. Very few people are choosing the phone. So it's probably taking over the phone, but we go back into that sales environment and start to think we need to make people making more phone calls, but the phone and Zoom together becomes a very powerful tool, or Teams become a very powerful tool, or Odro Interview, and there are other video sessions available to the public out there from there.
Yeah,
but we've got to make it available to people from there. So so it's all good stuff, Richard.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks very much. So let's ask Dave. I mean, that was really comprehensive from Howard there, Dave. So is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I was gonna say thanks, Howard, because you've done it so comprehensively. I think it's superb. What I was going to say is that we've said often on these webinars that the new currency is trust. It's trust between ourselves and our candidates. It's trust between ourselves and our clients. And it's absolutely vital that there is trust between us and the employees. And I think about the ones coming back. So should there be a plan? There absolutely should be a plan, but it's got to be customized by individual. That may be relatively simple if you've got 1 or 2 people coming back and you're a firm of 8 or 9. If you're a firm of 40 and you've got 10 coming back, or 300 and you've got 37 coming back, you've still got to customize it, because that customization builds that trust between you or your manager. If it isn't you as the leader of the firm, but it's one of your managers, that builds that trust. It makes the person who's coming back feel more valued, feels listened to, feels more understood. And then that is what builds that trust. And of course, what we do know is that with trust comes accelerated performance, because if the individual is now trusting you completely, believes in the purpose of the business, then they're going to perform better. They're going to place more people, and the jobs market, as we know, is going to work. And I think some of that trust as well comes from listening. So what's it really been like for you on furlough? Yes, they could say, oh, I survived all right, it was fine. But remember the mindset thing from the last question. Just dig a little bit underneath that surface. That question of how are you, always add one word to the end of how are you whenever you ask somebody how they are. How are you today? Because today opens up a whole host of different things. Because you know what? They may be really excited about coming back from furlough today, but tomorrow they may be a little bit more nervous and they feel they can't say it. And as a leader, your job as you build in that trust is to build that mindset for them, to help build them up. And some of them may not need building up, some of them may, but I think it's really important that you kind of ask how they are today and customize it, listen to your employees and listen to what they're saying about what they're feeling, and then you can build the custom plan. If you're going in as a leader saying, well, they're coming back, this is what they're going to do, this is how they're going to do it, this is when they're going to do it, okay, But if you go in and say, right, how are you feeling today? What do you think? What you're worried about? You can then build a plan for them based on what they're talking about, what they're feeling, and some of them may not know. But it's about engaging them as much as you can. And the final point I would say, Rich, is you've got to support your managers and your leaders into this new way of working and new way of thinking. I've said this many, many times, probably sound like a broken record, but your managers are coaches for your staff. And some of them haven't really done that very often because they've been judged on their performance. You know, you're 110%, you're great, you're doing really well, you've got a team and they're all performing. But the aspect of performance has differed now since this pandemic's come. And you know, if it's 148 days and some of them haven't been working in that 148 days, they've even forgotten what performance is like. So culturally, I would just support your managers as best you can to encourage them in this is the new way of leading. This is the new way of coaching your staff. I think if you can do that with a customized plan to get them back, you're going to build trust, you're going to build performance, and things will recover much, much faster.
So sounds like another webinar topic, that managers, leaders, the difference, discuss.
Oh yeah, we could do another one.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Right, Paul, thanks for joining us. Same point, please. So this is about, just to drag us back to the question, it's really about staff returning from furlough. Should there be a formal onboarding plan? And if so, what should be the key components?
I think Dave and Howard have covered quite a lot of the answer to that question off. I'll probably just come from a slightly different angle again. And the question I would be asking is, you know, should you actually be bringing those people back? You know, what does the data tell you in terms of how they performed over the last 12 months? Howard talked about using ratios, you know, ratios in terms of activity. But you know, how much net fee income have they been generating or margin over the last 12 months? And you know, what are they going to do over the next over the coming 12 months? So it's looking back but looking forward as well. And I think if there's one or two things that I've done and you know has really paid dividends in my career recently, it's just making sure that everybody is clear. If you are a consultant, we expect you to bill, you know, 100 grand with a margin in net fee income a year. If you're a senior consultant, it might be 120, 130, 140. If you're a principal, it might be 160. So just being very, very clear in terms of the expectations and transparency around what people need to deliver, I think is really important. And it's important for two things, because you can then proactively have conversations about pay. You know, if you want more money, then are you going to bill more? So it sort of heads that one off. But secondly, if you have to lose people consider logic if they can focus in on the data, and it sort of gets rid of some of the emotional aspect of being attached to people, which is really hard when you have to lose some of those people from your business. So I guess my question is more around, you know, what data have you got? Is that going to help you, you know, survive and build going forward? And if it's not, my last point is, you know, I always said to my leaders, you know, 20% of your time has got to be related to pipelining your own talent. We talk about this with clients, don't we? We say, you know, pipeline talent and, you know, forward plan and everything else. But when you're in the business, sometimes it's hard to step out of the business. But you're never ever going to realize what is out there in the marketplace, and if you can, you know, strengthen your team if you're not out and looking. And I think also by talking to people externally as well, just like we do with candidates, you find out so much information about them as an individual, but also their organization they're working for. So, you know, 20% of your time should be dedicated to strengthening your team. And I'll probably end on that one, Richard, for me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Thanks very much. Right, we've had a couple of questions that have come in, but I'm going to combine them so that they form one last question that we can give our full attention to, because I'm conscious I don't want to overrun too much. So really, this is all about educating clients and making sure that your teams are set up to do that properly. So if I paraphrase, what advice would you give to a client on how to educate their teams to fully understand the new way of doing business? Because it has changed over the last few months. but more importantly, how and what would you do to equip your teams to have the skill needed to open up those conversations? So, Paul, thanks for coming back. Would you take that one for me?
I will take that one for you. I think for me, I think before you can start to educate your team, I think it's about the role of a leader. And I think people mirror behavior and they'll replicate what they see. So within a leader, I think for me, a leader's got to be out there. They've got to be, you know, the expert, or certainly have a high degree of knowledge around things that you can have conversations with your customers about. That is not necessarily going to be, you know, have you got a role that I can fill? And Howard talks about this in the first question. It's about getting out there. It's about, you know, being in front of your customer, and being in front might not necessarily be meeting, but we've got to give clients a reason to spend an hour with us, whether it be over the phone, on a Zoom call, or face to face. So what is the value as a leader that you can add to that conversation, and why should the client be actually spending an hour of their time meeting you? Because at the moment in time, they may not necessarily be recruiting. So how can you build the relationship in a much more consultative fashion, rather than necessarily selling? And I think we are used to selling. We've shifted from a candidate-driven market to a client-driven market. A lot of our people will have never operated in a client-driven market. It's a total different kettle of fish. And so now it's about much more having consultative skills and being able to have a high degree of conversation with the client. It may be that you actually don't do any recruitment, or the recruitment conversations come to a halt for the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks. It may be that you're talking about things like preparation for IL35 coming into effect. Now that's been passed, and we've got about 6 months to get ready for that. It may be that you're talking to them about supporting them with screening. It may be that their in-house recruitment team has shrunk because they've equally had to make cuts. So what else can you do in terms of adding value? And I relay this story of this hotel in Manchester, and they advertised for a reception role. Within 48 hours, they had over 1,000 applications, 1,000 applications. And they asked this question, and I am going to try and get in touch with the hotel owner, by the way, to ask them this question. I wonder how many agencies called them up the next morning and said, can I help you with sifting or screening of those applications to not to charge, you know, can I help you for a day, or I might have somebody on furlough that I can bring back, or we've got somebody that I can support. What can we do to try and help you? Because it's so desperate times, you know, people are struggling so much in the market. We've got to push that empathy level higher than ever before, and we need to make sure we look after people, because people don't forget. They will look at the experience of applying for a role and not being responded to, or having a horrific experience. So what can we do, and how can we be different going forward? So for me, to answer the question really succinctly, I think it's about the leader's got to take the lead here. You know, have you had a virtual meeting or face-to-face meeting with your top 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 clients in the last 6 months? If not, why not? How do you have that meeting? What cause or reason are you going to give the client to actually have that meeting with you? And how can you go one level higher? How can you go, if you've got a relationship at a resource business partner level, how can you go one higher with that? How can you meet the head of talent acquisition? If you've got the relationship there, how do you get in front of the HR director? At the end of the day, we're trying to push the relationship up so that we've got a relationship at the C-suite that Howard's talked about on previous webinars. That's so critical. If you're doing that, then I think your team, and you're relaying the reasons why and everything else to your teams, then I think your teams are going to want to replicate that and push those relationships broader than just the top 10.
Thanks very much, Paul. And I think, yeah, I'm not sure if Dave and Howard are going to be able to answer any more of this question with that one, but here's Dave to give it a go.
I wasn't sure whether I was coming in or whether Howard was coming in, but I think Paul covered it pretty comprehensively. I think some of the advice that I would give is you need to take time to assess the readiness of your team. Our businesses are different now than they were even 30 or 40 days ago, because 30 or 40 days ago we were in the middle of the pandemic. We were all assuming we're going to be working from home. There were certain things we could do and we can't do. That's moved on now. We've now got this balance, particularly in London, it's very quiet, but we've got this balance of people still working from home, some of them working in the office. It looks different, it feels different. If we're assuming that those that have been working through all of this are still with us, they're still enjoying, they still understand the trust and the purpose thing that we spoke before, how ready are they for this slightly newer way of working? How ready are they to give advice to the clients? You know, we talk about trust. Well, we want our clients to trust us. We want to help them, lead them. If we can influence them and lead them, then it's the right thing to do, and we'll get more business. So I would take time as a leader to assess the readiness of my team, and I'd look at the leadership priorities for each of the people. Who are your team? Is a really good question. Is it the same team as you had before, or do you want to use this as an opportunity to bring more people in the team, to get more ideas, to share some more successes and failures, and to learn from those failures? So also as a business leader, what is your purpose for your business? Did you think that before this pandemic you were thinking, actually in 3 years time I want to sell my business? Well, now that's put a halt to it, or has it? You still need to have a strong leadership and management team working underneath you, use that phrase, or working alongside you, for you to maybe realize your own personal goals for the business. Well, then you've got to look at the team you've got, and you may want to choose to add to that team, look at the priorities, what are they focusing on? It's absolutely vital, clearly, that we focus on performance. It's absolutely vital that we place more people into jobs, because that's what our sector does, that's what we do. But it's also very important that we look at the priorities, and we look at how they're engaged with their staff, how they're training their staff, how and what leadership looks like. One thing I would do, and you may think this is a bizarre thing to say at this early stage, is do a succession review. Have a look at the people underneath you. Who can take over from you? What is it that makes you as good as you are, from founding the company to growing the company? Well, what are the skills you're seeing in the team immediately beneath you, and how do they need to step up? Where are the gaps? What do they need to do? And put in a program to help develop that, because your business will move forward as the people who are working for you move forward. And we've got a changing world. Things are very, very much changing. So it's about getting that balance right as well. And make sure that the critical aspects of leadership are very easy on display, but also very easy to see that this is where you are, this is where you need to be, and this is how I'm going to help you get there. And this is my expectation of you as to how you're going to get there. And the last bit for me, I think, is and it's a bit more difficult when we're on things like Zoom and Teams, but is to provide that guidance and that leadership as regularly as you can. It's not about having a weekly performance review. It's about picking up something that you've heard or you've seen straight away, picking up the phone and saying, actually, how about this? Let's role play this. Let's do that. Because those critical aspects of leadership are what's going to need to come to the fore as you get your teams and everybody back working again. Hopefully that's
brilliant.
helpful.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Something left for Howard, I hope.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to just pause for 1 second before Howard, you carry on from that, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for the poll question to come up. So this is our weekly tradition where we ask about the confidence that you have of the market returning. So if you can, please, as the audience, fill in this, please. Howard, just a reminder, you may not be able to see yourself, but your video is still on. And I'm going to give you the opportunity for that question, but also, Howard, any key takeaway, so the last word really, any key takeaway that you'd like the audience to have from this webinar?
Okay, so I think Paul and David sort of did the traditional first in, best dressed type scenario, so I've been left with some very odd clothes to wear. So I think looking at that, I'm going to look at it in a very slightly different way. The question was about clients and about candidates. The question was about clients and agencies. What can we teach them and what can we do? What's new? What's different? Okay, how do we educate a client? And I think I've said this before on past webinars that we have probably had a lot of meetings in our business about what services we're going to give to a client, but that meeting has lacked one person. it's lacked a client in that meeting. And then clients will have lots of meeting about how they're going to reduce their cost and overall cost of recruitment. And guess what's missing from that meeting? A recruiter to give them genuine advice on how to do that. So we've got to start to think about, to educate clients, we have to educate ourselves to spot opportunities within clients to help solve their problems. If we can help solve their problems and reduce their overall cost of recruitment, and that's from the initiation of a recruitment process right to that candidate leaving the business, because that is the end of the recruitment process. So you've got to start to think about how we can reduce costs, because what clients are saying, and there was a big survey by one of the ATS companies, and they came back with some very key points of what clients said they were looking for. And one of them, the main one, was to look to create a more efficient recruitment process, because that will save them time and money. So if we can help them streamline their recruitment processes, then that's really a good thing to be doing. The other thing from that was they want to have a candidate to have a better candidate journey. So again, educating a client on how they can improve that candidate journey through the recruitment process, but not just through the recruitment process, through their whole process within that business, working for that business, etc., is really important. And one of the things that clients said they really wanted to have was to be able to make a better decision in the recruitment process, and therefore they wanted more data to be able to make that due diligence process a little bit more scientific than just finger in the air as it is most of the time. And think about the amount of data that we have and how we can use that data. So what we're talking about is educating our clients on how we can improve and streamline their recruitment process, therefore reducing their cost. Means we have to train our consultants on the basics of that to spot that opportunity and have the confidence to speak to clients in that manner. And that goes back to what I think Paul Jacobs and I have been saying for quite a long time. That word consultative becomes there a very powerful word, because we're no longer that consultant, which a lot of people think a recruitment agency is. It's a consultant. We generally become a consultant and give them best advice about how to improve their business, not just about how to recruit the right person. So I think that, to me, is the educational bit that we need to be going back to our clients with, but then we need to be refreshing our consultants on how to actually deliver that. So it's a slightly different sell to what we've been doing before, but I think it will have massive benefits to you and get you closer to your clients and make your client need you more from there. So the final question was about takeaways.
Sorry, let me just stop you there, Howard, just for 1 second. Could we close the poll, please? We've got the respondents answered. That's brilliant. Thank you. I'll come back to that right at the very end. So if you can close that and go back to the slides, and then we can see Howard talking. So brilliant.
Back again. So that question about takeaway, I think, to me, the takeaway on this is very simple, is that it's all about the leader's mindset. It's your mindset to implement an onboarding strategy. It's your mindset to change the way you treat your staff and the way you treat your clients. It's your mindset to create a culture that provides positivity, growth, and is the catalyst to your staff's well-being, which means that they will provide that well-being to your client, which will come full circle back to you. So to me, that's a takeaway. It's about your mindset and your readiness to change, and your readiness to change for the better, to enable yourself to create a far better business. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Howard. And I think that really brings us to the end of the webinar in a very nice, neat manner. So all that really remains for me is to thank all of our speakers and the team in the background that have been making things happen for us. The slide, the confidence slide that I jumped over, I thank you all for doing so and filling that in. We will be releasing those figures further down the line. As a quick synopsis, it was 10% in favor, or not in favor, but saying that it's going to be a quick turn back, 90% saying that the industry will come back but may take some time, and no one that was pessimistic about the return. So that's very much in line with what we've had previously. So thank you very much. I'd like to remind you all that the email that you will get following this webinar will come out within the next 24 hours. And you can see the slide there with all of the links to the hubs. And one final reminder, just to say that all recordings are available on the REC website, and that our 3 speakers today have offered an hour of their time free of charge to any of our listeners. So please take up those offers and do check out the previous webinars. And until next week, goodbye.